Hey, what is going on guys, RvzStealth here, and in today's video we're going to be taking a look at what's flying under the radar so far in patch 9.23, so some sleeper OP, underrated champions, builds, rune setups for this patch. Alright, so to start things off here for a mid lane pick, Kassadin is doing really well with Conquer in this patch, but it isn't being played very much at all. It has a very low pick rate. It is doing very well for the people who are using it though, and with the new Conquer, with the new Presence of Mind, really good for Kassadin in 9.23. The new Presence of Mind, just giving him that bonus mana and also giving him the extra mana on takedowns is like the perfect rune for Kassadin, so the changes that it got in this patch are really good for him. And then by taking the Conquer, it just makes Kassadin's mid to late game even scarier. If you're in a more difficult matchup, I'd still look to take the Fleet Footwork on Kassadin. That's still a very viable option for him, and it's probably the better option in most matchups for Kassadin in this patch. But if you're in easier matchups, if you're able to win matchups and you don't need that added sustain from Fleet Footwork, then Conquer is very good for him. You're going to stack that up extremely quickly. Once you get your level 6, especially on Kassadin, you're pretty much going to get an instant 8 stacks of the Conquer if you use your full combo on the opponent, so it's very easy to get that stacked out on Kassadin and benefit a ton from the max stacks. So next here for a jungle pick, Nidalee with Conquer is something that a lot of pro players are playing in this patch. You don't see it very much in solo queue right now. For the majority of elos, most Nidalee players are still running the electrocute on her, but higher elo and pros are really liking the Conquer. You're lacking a bit of one-shot potential by running the Conquer instead of the electrocute, but what you're gaining is you're gaining a much better skirmish. So in extended skirmishes, the Conquer is going to come in handy there, and it's going to allow you to win out on a lot of those as opposed to if you were running the electrocute. So one of the strongest and most underrated top laners for this patch is Cassiopeia. Now Cassiopeia in the mid lane is also a great pick right now, but not really underrated. She's more so underrated up in the top lane. So Cassiopeia top into a lot of bruisers, into more tanks that are being played in the top lane is just an extremely good pick, and we're slowly seeing like more tanks being played up in the top lane. Bruisers are still the ones that are dominating right now and still the ones that are being played the most, but slowly but surely as we see tanks come back into the meta here, really good for the Cassiopeia because she can build the Leandry, she's got the Conquer, she just has the ability to shred tanks because of her consistent DPS, so she's a pretty strong pick, very underrated pick up in the top lane. Similar to Kassadin, the new Presence of Mind, just such a good rune for her. Increasing her maximum mana there actually gives her more damage as well by going for the Archangels, getting the mana back on takedown, super impactful in mid to late game fights. And by running the Conquer on the Cassiopeia as well, you're just gonna almost always have that fully stacked out. As long as you're hitting your Qs, following up with your Es, you're always gonna be able to retain max stacks with that on Cassiopeia. So you're benefiting pretty much all the time from the extra damage and the extra healing from that rune. Now, believe it or not, solo lane Nocturne is actually performing better than jungle Nocturne in 9.23, so both top lane and mid lane Nocturne very underrated for this patch. He's doing great ever since the introduction of Sanguine Blade. He's also doing really good with the new Conquer up in the top lane. For mid lane Nocturne, you can either run the Conquer, the Lethal Tempo even, or the Electrocute on him. I think it does depend on the matchup, so if you're up against a very squishy enemy mid lane champion and you think you can just burst them out at level 6 there, and once you get your Sanguine Blade, then I would look to run the Electrocute on him. If you're up in the top lane and you're up against like a bruiser top laner, if you're going to be taking more extended trades, then running the Conquer is really good because he can stack that up pretty quickly and you are going to benefit from those max stacks on him. So how you want to play this pick in the solo lane, depending on the matchup, you can actually have some pretty good kill pressure in the laning phase. If you run the Ignite on Nocturne, you get an all-in with him, get the fear off on the opponent. You actually do have some pretty good all-in potential in the laning phase, but in harder matchups and more difficult matchups, it's pretty easy for you to just look to farm up to that level 6, get your level 6, get your Sanguine Blade, and then once you hit that spike, that's where you really do start to come online. So if you're just not confident in your matchup, you don't know if you can fight your opponent or not, wait till you get your Sanguine Blade, hit your level 6 there, and then just look to go all in, and you're gonna win the 1v1 pretty much every single time. So taking a look at an AD carry now, Barz with his traditional setup of the Bork into Rageblade isn't doing as well in this patch, and Barz as an AD carry isn't one of the strongest for sure, but a new setup that's been going around on him that like Sneaky's been running in solo queue is more of a crit setup on Barz, where you go Stormrazor into Static Shiv and then Infinity Edge. What you're getting from this setup on Barz as opposed to the Bork into Rageblade setup is you're just getting a lot more burst damage, and you're relying a lot less on your ability to kite and micro in team fights. With the Bork into Rageblade setup, you get a lot of attack speed with that setup there, and you don't get as much just upfront damage, so you do rely a lot more on your ability to auto attack consistently in team fights. And for your average player who doesn't have the best micro and the best ability to kite in fights, the Bork into Rageblade build is going to be a little bit more inconsistent. By going for Stormrazor into Static Shiv, you do have that energized damage coming out of both those abilities, so one auto attack, once you got your energized damage stacked up, is going to deal a lot of damage. You also have more AD coming out of the Stormrazor, and you also do have a lot more AD coming out of the Infinity Edge, so your full combo, your full burst combo, if you hit an ult on a target, is just going to hurt a lot harder. And then for another AD carry here, Twitch is doing really good with the Stormrazor rush into a Hurricane and Infinity Edge. So pretty similar build to Barz, but you're just going for the Hurricane instead of the Static Shiv. You can also run the Conquer on this Twitch setup, and by going for the Stormrazor rush, once you hit your level 6, once you get your Stormrazor and you got the Conquer there as well, you're just going to burst a lot harder. So if you're in an aggressive matchup, or if you're playing with an aggressive support in the laning phase and they're going to want to look to all in and play aggressive, then going for this setup is just going to allow you to burst a lot harder, and it's going to allow you to pick up a lot more kills throughout the early to mid game. More difficult matchups, or if the enemy team does have a lot of HP stacking champions, you can still go for the Blood of the Ruined King. It's going to give you a little bit more sustain in the laning phase. It's going to allow you to deal with tanks a little bit better. So I think that both builds are still perfectly viable for this patch, but if you do want to snowball a little bit harder, if you want to play more aggressive, then going for the Stormrazor setup is a bit better on Twitch for this patch now. So for a jungle pick, Xin Zhao is performing super good in the preseason. He's doing much better than he was in previous patches, and it's mainly because if you get ahead with this champion in the early game, because Ketchup XP got removed from jungle camps, if you're constantly invading with Xin Zhao and you're killing the enemy jungler and taking their camps, it's going to be pretty much impossible for that enemy jungler to look to come back into the game. Because of how easy to execute Xin Zhao is as well, if you get ahead on the champion, there's no really messing up an invade, or you can't really mess up a 1v1. If you're ahead on him, your damage is going to stick. You're going to be able to 1v1 the opponent. It's not like you have a skill shot in your kit or anything, so your damage is going to be very consistent, and if you get a lead with him, you're going to be able to pressure that, and you're going to be able to take over games. For the rune setup for Xin right now, Hail of Blades I'd say is just slightly better than Conquer. Both are performing very well on him for 9.23, but the Hail of Blades just gives you a little bit more upfront damage, gives you more burst potential. So if you're in an easy matchup, or if you're in a favorable matchup, I would look to be taking the Hail of Blades there. If you're in a more difficult matchup though, or if you're not going to be able to just straight up burst out the enemy jungler, then running the Conquer can also be a great option. Now, a pretty underrated build setup for supports on this patch is incorporating the new Shurelya's at least somewhere in your build path. So Thresh players in this patch, a lot of them are buying it as a third item after the Zeke's and after the Knight's Vow. Some Blitzcrank players are even rushing it in this patch. Soraka players are usually picking it up as their third item. So it does depend on the champion as to when you'd be looking to pick it up in the game, but grabbing a Shurelya's at least some point is performing extremely well on pretty much every support in 9.23. So going back to some solo lane picks now, Lucian up in the top lane or in the mid lane. A lot of pro players are liking this right now for 9.23. It doesn't perform the best in solo queue. Your average solo queue player doesn't do very well with solo lane Lucian, but it's a pick to where if you can play it well, if you know how to pilot the champion, then it can be a very strong pick for solo queue. With the Sanguine Blade Rush there, just very strong all-in potential once you pick up that item. The extra lethality you do get from the Sanguine Blade there makes your ultimate hit super hard. The extra attack speed you get from it makes your all-in potential that much better, so it's just a really good rush item for the solo lane Lucian. Press the Attack or Conquer are great options for Lucian. The Press the Attack usually does a little bit better than Conquer right now for solo lane Lucian. It just allows you to burst a little bit harder in the laning phase, so if you're in pretty easy matchups, if you're in a squishy matchup and you think you can solo kill very early on in the lane, then I would be looking to take the Press the Attack. And then similar to the Lucian, the Tristana solo lane pick is also great right now with that Sanguine Blade. So the build setup on the Tristana is a little bit different than Lucian. It's going to be Sanguine Blade into Stormrazor and then the Infinity Edge there. So just a lot of AD with this setup. Not as much attack speed, but you are going to be hitting very, very hard with your auto attacks. Your E, your ultimate are going to hit extremely hard. So it just makes it so that your 1v1 potential with this setup is very strong with Tristana. Once you finish your Sanguine on Tristana, just be paying attention to when the enemy missteps in the laning phase or to when they use an ability and they don't hit you with it. Look to jump in, take advantage of that, burst the opponent out, and if you can get some solo kills going in the laning phase with Tristana, it's so easy for you to just completely take over the game. You run the Demolish on her, your E and Demolish melts towers in the early to mid game, so once you get your mid lane tower down, you can just run top lane, run bot lane, take another tower super quickly, so you just have so much snowball potential with solo lane Tristana. And then for another jungle pick here, Udyr is doing great in the preseason for pretty much the same reasons as to why Xin Zhao is doing great. He does have very good skirmish potential, very good 1v1 potential, and can look to invade in the early game. So a path you can look to take on both the Xin Zhao and the Udyr in this patch is you can just look to take your buff and then path immediately over to the enemy's buff on the opposite side of the map. Look to take that. If they do show up there, you can look to 1v1 them, look to kill them, take their whole jungle, and you've pretty much just won the game for yourself after that point. Now, no joke, one of the strongest Conquer users in this patch and probably the most underrated Conquer user is the Auriel Sol. So Auriel Sol is doing so much better in solo queue ever since the new Conquer and the new Presence of Mind got introduced. If you don't know, every tick of your orbs on Auriel Sol gives you 2 stacks of Conquers. So your full combo, if you use your Q, get all of your stacks of your W or all your ticks of your W off on your opponent, that's going to be pretty much an instant 8 stacks with Auriel Sol. And if you just auto attack, weave in some autos there, you're going to be able to get max stacks so quickly on this champion. The new Presence of Mind really helps out with his mana struggles as well. Some Auriel Sol players in this patch are even skipping out on going the Rod of Ages and they're just going Rylai's into the Liandry's because you do get that extra mana from the Presence of Mind, the maximum mana there, and you're also going to be getting the mana back on takedown. So it just makes it so that you don't even need to go Rod of Ages in this patch. It is still a good option on him. A lot of players are still going for it, but you can definitely just skip that and go for Rylai's into Liandry's and hit a massive mid-game spike. And then to round it out here for a support pick, it's going to be Pantheon support, and we have seen this Pantheon support pick a little bit over the past couple months here. It does perform much better now in the preseason though because of the introduction of the new support items. With the introduction of the new support items, great for Pantheon because having that AD allows you to deal extra damage throughout the game. The new Umbral Glaive is also a great item for the Pantheon support, and just throughout the laning phase, his all-in potential is so strong and it's very easy to execute. Once you get max stacks with Pantheon, you just look to W onto the opponent. If your AD carry is somebody who can look to follow up with a lot of burst damage, then you're going to find yourself picking up a ton of kills in the laning phase. So something like Tristana, Lucian, Caitlyn, really good paired up with the Pantheon. If you hit a Pantheon stun, you pretty much guarantee to burn the enemy's flash in the laning phase. So that is going to be all for the video, guys. Those were a bunch of different champions, builds, or rune setups that are very underrated so far in this patch. Not a lot of people are running them, but they are performing very well. So if you haven't tried out any of these yet in patch 9.23, definitely look to do so. If you guys enjoyed this video, be sure to drop a like and subscribe if you have yet to already. So thanks for watching, have an awesome day, and I will see you in my next video.